Tēnā koe, we've got Brad Totorewa with us today. Brad, if you could just introduce yourself.
Kia ora, ai. Brad Totorewa hau, no Rangiriri, o Maurea marae, te marae, a ko Ngāti Ngā ho te hapu.
So at the moment you're doing a building development down in Rangiriri, just over the road from the original Pa site. How did this development come about?
Yeah, the development came about from my participation in the 150-year commemoration of Rangiriri. It's been a long journey in terms of my involvement in the Rangiriri space, but the idea came about. So I was one of the organisers of the 150-year commemoration. That was in 2013, and in consultation with some of my elders, including my mum, I asked her the question, my mother, if she could recall what they did in the 100th, the centennial of the commemoration. And she spoke about a little kapahaka group doing waiata. And my response to her was, well, this year, 150 years on, we're going to do something so significant that it will remain etched in the minds and the hearts of everybody that witnesses the commemoration and that visits that day. And so I didn't know what it was going to look like, but it ended up looking like me reaching out to a lot of the maurako, the Māori weaponry tutors, experts across Aotearoa who descended from other iwi that assisted us in the 1863 invasion. And so I wrote what we call a ngeri, or a peru. A peru is when you're taiaha and you're jumping up and down, you're doing the haka, basically in the most simplistic form of description for the viewers. And I wrote this haka, and then I taught it to 200 people. And then we brought them all on the day. We had wānanga practices around the Bay of Plenty area up here in Waikato. And so the day looked like 200 men and women that were hiding behind the trenches coming up over the ridge in full force, doing this mass haka. We had children lying on the ground pretending they were dead. We had conch shells blowing, wahine doing karanga, people wailing. It was quite a moving moment, yeah. And at that moment when I was watching this reenactment, so it was a reenactment of what possibly happened on the day of the invasion, and while I was watching my men pick up these children who were pretending to be dead, at that moment I had this vision that I would rebuild the trenches and I would run tours and I would use this as an educational moment to transform the minds of the ignorant, of the uneducated, of those who have no idea whatsoever about what happened there. And that's what I saw. So, that's 2013, 8 years ago, roughly 8 years ago. And that particular format of the commemoration was adopted to all the subsequent commemorations thereafter. And it ended up being this big commemoration where all of our iwi, went down to Rangiaowhia, Orako, Pukehina, Te Tarata, Wairenga Ahika, and then up north, Rua Peka Peka, and they were all following the same format. So it made sense to me, not knowing that in the future the Ministry of Education would make it compulsory to teach our New Zealand history to our kids. And so we move into that space in 2023. So that's where long story short, that's where this vision came about, to build the trenches.
How did you receive the funding for such a massive project?
Yeah, the government put out about 3 years ago a program called Provincial Growth Fund, in that they would fund local community projects that would contribute to the economic growth of that particular community. And so we did, because everything was stored in my head, so I was lucky to be supported by Waikato Tainui, who contracted people to come and sit with me, advisors and consultants to sit with me, and I would just talk. And then they would materialise into strategic plans and, application forms and stuff like that. And we were given just under $3 million to build the trenches.
What was the actual intent of building the Pa site?
Yeah, the intent was empowering our hapu, Ngāti Naho, and our relative hapu, our relations that are around us, that's in terms of the whole Waikato, empowering them to tell our own narratives and use those narratives to, one thing is to disrupt the thinking of those who are uneducated about these particular sites. So it was an educational tool. That was the true intent. Come here, I'll take you for a tour, I'll tell you our story. I won't be sitting in the grievance mode, but it's all about telling the right story. For far too long we've had non-Māori tell our story. And for far too long, in terms of all the history that exists, all the research and the films and stuff like that, none of them talk to the intelligence of our ancestors. How extraordinary they were as engineers. And on that note, the engineer of the site, Te Wharepu, Te Aho Te Rangi Wharepu, I'm a direct descendant of him. And so 5 generations below him, and this year, in this generation, I'm leading out a project that he designed in the 1800s. I have no engineering background whatsoever. I can hardly count. But here I am leading out this multi-million-dollar project, a $5 million project, and sitting with architects and engineers and stuff and telling them what to do, what it should look like. There's a lot of learnings in there, there's a lot of flaws in there, a lot of learnings in there for me and our iwi, but that's basically it, really, as an educational tool. And then that slowly turned into a tourism tool. So I'm clear that I'm not building a zoo for people to come and look at animals in that context. For far too often you can go to, go and pay some money, go and watch some Maoris swing a poi and do a haka. That zoo mentality is, this is about actually, this is real stuff. This isn't no Hāngi night. This is come here and hear the stories from our people. And while you're at it, we're going to have some interaction and have warriors run around and stuff like that. I won't say too much. I'll be giving it away in terms of what people could expect when they arrive to the trenches.
Do you believe that it will become a sort of a tourist mecca site similar to the Tamaki village, where tourists are closer to the airport and they can get to the site much easier than they can to Rotorua, for instance?
Yeah. I acknowledge our te arawa tuakana. They've been in the tourism game all their lives, basically. They are the tuakana of tourism in the motu. And, you know, we've got a foot in the door now. We are the first ever iwi in history to rebuild our fighting trenches to this magnitude, first in the world, and absolutely it would be bigger than Hobbiton's. I believe in that. Absolutely. So the world is going to, Joe, the world is going to come to Rangiriri when when the borders open sometime. It might be in 2 years, it might be 3 years, but they'll definitely come to see this. It's extraordinary.
Kia ora, Brad. I really love your vision. Thanks for joining us today at Southern Cross. Kia ora.
Kia ora, tēnā koe te tuakana, ngā mihi.